GOP presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy on Sunday said it's not productive for companies to go after college students who belong to groups making dumb political statements, a debate tied to the Israeli-Hamas war that has roiled campuses across the U.S. Ramaswamy, a Harvard and Yale-educated entrepreneur who is the only millennial contender in a Republican contest, took to X to remark on the Harvard student groups who have been publicly called out for signing on to a letter that held Israel responsible for the deadly terrorist attack by Hamas militants earlier this month. The Harvard student group who co-signed the anti-Israeli letter are simple fools, Ramaswamy wrote, but it's not productive for companies to blacklist kids for being members of student groups that make dumb political statements on campuses. It's not great now if companies refuse to hire kids who are part of student groups that once adopted the wrong view on Israel, he continued. This isn't a legal point, it's a cultural point. I say this as someone who vehemently disagrees with those Harvard student groups. Ramaswamy in his statement also decried the left-wing cancel culture that he said led to the persecution of people who wore red hats in support of former President Donald Trump. He then pivoted back to the ongoing debate on college campuses, arguing that individuals calling for the affected students to be blacklisted are responding from a place of understandable hurt, but I'm confident that in the fullness of time they will agree with me on the wisdom of avoiding these cancel culture tactics, he added. Ramaswamy's position on the issue is also notable because it thoroughly contrasts the views of Bill Ackman, the billionaire hedge fund manager and Harvard alum who throughout 2023 has praised the 38-year-old's presidential candidacy. In August, Ackman wrote on X that Ramaswamy had a remarkably deep understanding of important issues. Over the past week, Ackman has been one of the most vocal proponents of not only identifying members of the 34 student groups, but making sure that other business leaders don't admit them into their ranks in the business world. I have been asked by a number of CEOs if Harvard would release a list of the members of each of the Harvard organizations that have issued the letter assigning sole responsibility for Hamas's heinous acts to Israel, so as to ensure that none of us inadvertently hire any of their members. Ackman wrote on X last week, if in fact their members support the letter they have released, the names of the signatories should be made public so their views are publicly known. Last week, a billboard truck drove near Harvard's campus in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and showed the names and images of students who are allegedly affiliated with the organizations that were signatories of the pro-Palestinian letter. But over the past few days, several students and organizations have distanced themselves from the letter, with some stating they had not fully read the statement before they signed on to the message. The Hamas terrorist attack on Israel earlier this month left at least 1,400 people dead in Israel, according to the Israeli Prime Minister's press office. According to Gaza's health ministry, more than 2,200 Palestinians have been killed since the beginning of the conflict. So, I'm someone who's disagreed with Ramaswamy on a lot of things. I'm sure we're going to have even more disagreements as time goes on and we get further into this primary, but this is one instance where I can unequivocally, without any type of asterisk or, but or give him a complete round of applause. He's taken a very principled position because even if he's pro-Israel, he is saying these kids, he says simple fools, but he's admitting there is something wrong with the idea that if a person who is at an institution where they're supposed to be challenging themselves and learning what they believe decides to sign on to a letter that for the rest of their life they should be blacklisted from companies because they took a position on a conflict that's not even happening over here. I completely agree with that. I wouldn't be in favor of revealing the signatories of that letter if they took the complete opposite side of my view and just totally 100% sided with Israel and said the Hamas had no rationale, they shouldn't be heard or understood in any capacity whatsoever. To hell with the Palestinians. I would still be opposed to a letter that read like that by virtue of the fact that I don't think it is productive to. I mean, let's call it what it is. A lot of conservatives cry about censorship, but what is more censoring than trying to prevent someone from working? In some cases, years down the road after they graduate from school, because they took a position on a conflict where they signed a letter that expressed an opinion you didn't like. So, one of the things I want to mention here is that you have Ackman. He said that he wants to get them, make their views publicly known. Yes, isn't it sad that a billionaire, all this money, someone who's very rich, went to that same school, is like, the students going there don't support my position on this foreign conflict? okay, well, I guess I'll make it hard for them to get jobs. And then you had, and this is even more insane, a billboard truck drove around with the names and images of students who were affiliated with the letter on it. So you're going to have, and this is where, like, I don't agree with the letter. I think it is insane, whether you're pro-Palestine or not, and I am, to pretend that the killing of over 1,000 innocent people was justified. I will unequivocally denounce that without any type of ums or buts. It's as simple as that. There's whether we can be sympathetic to Palestinians and not condone violence, because we don't condone the violence that's directed toward them by the Israeli government, and we don't condone it, vice versa. So even as someone doesn't agree with the letter, I think it's insane that a billionaire, a rich person, someone who's got all this money, all this time to do whatever he wants, is going to sit there and basically pick on people with much less power than himself, and try to make sure they're screwed for the rest of their life because they signed on to a letter that some of them are now saying they didn't read the entirety of, which I totally believe that, because there's a lot of times where you'll sign something for a job or to go to some school, just whatever, and you don't read the fine print, you don't read every single thing that's written there. You'll have these different updates on your phone where they'll have a series of paragraphs, and you'll just click off on it without reading the whole thing. And whether that's good or not, we can have a discussion about it, but my point is, it's not that big of a stretch of the imagination that a lot of those people probably didn't even read the whole thing. They probably saw something that looked like it was not entirely pro-Israel and decided to put their name on it, and then after all the backlash, like, oh, that was in there too? I can completely buy into that. But Ramaswamy took some heat for this. I know Megyn Kelly at one point was trying to take the side of being so pro-Israel that you try to destroy the lives of those growing up. And I don't know, it's just so ironic to live in an era where if some conservative commentator gets banned off of YouTube, off of Twitter, off of just any website, censorship, right? But now you have some conservatives, and I'm sure there's probably some liberal people too, who are so pro-Israel, like so entrenched in the butt crack of this foreign government, that they are willing to destroy the futures of American students by virtue of them taking a position on this war that is only known because they wrote their name on the end of a letter. A letter that, again, I don't agree with the position of, because I do think you should blame Hamas for the Hamas terrorist attack. But regardless, I can't imagine saying you're against censorship and canceling, but then you're trying to cancel people over signing something. I don't know. It's just, it's really, conflicts like this, they always bring out the worst in people. You see a lot of their true nature in terms of like what stuff they tolerate and who they choose to go after. But even with Ramaswamy calling them fools because they're not entirely pro-Israel, and a lot of these politicians are just, they are right in Netanyahu's ball court, I can still say I'm glad that he at least admitted you shouldn't try to cancel these kids over, or I guess these young adults over a letter that they didn't even write. So I'll give him credit for this one, because it does take some courage to not just be like, that's how sad the Israeli lobby with AIPAC and these other groups that try to get you to support their government are, where they've turned American politicians into just borderline rubber stamps for a foreign government. And we're like this with Saudi Arabia too, which makes it even more ironic, because we always say, oh, we support Israel because they're the only democracy in the Middle East. But then Saudi Arabia, which is not a democracy, oh, we still support him because we get a bunch of money from them. So it's sad that we live in such a pro-Israeli government, American government era, that to even get a politician who insults the students who had an opinion he didn't agree with come out and say, but also we shouldn't try to cancel them over this. Even that's like a big step, and that just shows you how screwed up our system is, where there's Ackman and whoever was driving that stupid truck and whoever pulled some pictures together, they are more in favor of the Israeli government's PR campaign than the future of American students. They're going to make it to where it's harder for for these American students that signed on to this goofy letter to get a job, all because they want to show unquestioned, complete 100% groupthink support for the Israeli government, and I find that very sad.